I mean, I'm a dark side fan, so it's like I think that's my empathy, right? Like something happened to you, something hurt you so bad that you're behaving this way. Come talk to me. Come talk to me. Like if I could be the villain therapist, like sign me up. I'm there, 100%.
Hello, and welcome back to You Need a Counselor. It is May the 4th, 2021. So happy Star Wars Day, everybody. May the 4th be with you all. So we are very, very excited. We've got a super exciting guest today that's going to talk to us about Star Wars and various fandoms, Marvel fandoms, Star Wars fandoms, in the ways that clinicians and counselors are out there that are huge fans of this stuff and that can help integrate those interests that we all have. We all have those things that we're into. For me, it's musicals. So if I get a therapist who loves musicals, I'm all about it. And so the way that therapists can utilize those interests and our own interests to really help connect with us in a different kind of way. So I'm Julie Johnson. I am the president and founder of Heart and Solutions counseling agency here in Iowa. So if you are in Iowa, definitely go ahead and give us a call or send us a message so that you can get started with either in-office mental health therapy or telehealth counseling right now.
And I'm Krissa. I am the vice president at Heart and Solutions in charge of our behavioral health department. So we go in home and work with kids ages 4 to 18 on different behavioral skills with the whole family. And so we can do in-home right now or telehealth like Julie mentioned as well. And this is our podcast, You Need a Counselor. So we are designed for people curious about counseling, but have barriers keeping them from experiencing the benefits of counseling. Our mission is to share stories about counseling, good, bad, and indifferent, and spread the message that everyone can benefit from mental health and behavioral health counseling services.
Yeah, so we post on Sunday nights at 5 p.m. Central Time. So set that on your planner. That gives you the entire week to get set up with a counselor, to call a counselor like our guest today, or if you're in Iowa, to give us a call at Heart and Solutions, or if you're in another state, reach out to us. We'll help you find a counselor in your zip code as well. We also recommend, Sunday nights, Krista and I are putting away our laundry, getting ourselves prepped for the week, making sure we've got outfits to wear. So batch up your laundry, put that together, put that all away on Sunday nights. And that way you can listen to the podcast that gives you the entire week to get scheduled with your counselor. Okay, so let's start talking about our new guest and our Star Wars episode. So we've got Maria LaQuerre, which, gosh, that's a cool therapist name, LaQuerre. Cares, you guys. So, Maria, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me. Yeah, and on today of all holy days for Star Wars fans, this is like ideal. I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you so much. So Maria is a licensed marriage and family therapist. And she works with clients of all ages, as well as individually, but also as a family, working on family system stuff. So how cool that if you've got a child who is super into Star Wars or different kinds of movies, that they can do some interventions with Maria. But also if maybe you are a parent who's also interested, like my husband, who is extremely interested in Star Wars and Marvel, it's a great way to just be able to connect as a family or connect with your kids, or with parents. So Maria practices right now in New Mexico, and she also does consultation for other therapists. So not only working with clients directly, but also just helping other therapists to practice their clinical skills as well. Maria is a huge Star Wars fan. And before the episode started, she showed us exactly how much of a Star Wars fan she is. So Maria, welcome. And please let us know, because looking at you right now on the screen, for those watching on YouTube, you wouldn't necessarily know, right? Looking at Maria, how much of a fangirl she is for Star Wars. But Maria, let us in on give us a little tour of the screen.
Sure. Yeah. I like to call it like geek chic, if you will. I stole a term from a friend. But yeah, so like, I mean, you'll never find me without some sort of fandom representation. So like my kimono has got Star Wars. My earrings are Death Stars. I've pulled some of my pops that I have. And if I were to swing it around, you'd see my miniature wall for sand tray work. And I've got Disney, I've got Marvel, I've got more superheroes and Inside Out characters. So yeah, I really like to use pop culture in a way in therapy, in a way to like normalize it, but also to geek. I have my own lightsaber wall display at home. We like the Star Wars is like a lifestyle for some of us, and it's really okay to like bring that into our therapy rooms. It gives you something to join about, right? Like if we can geek out about Captain Marvel, or like the latest episodes of Falcon and the Winter Soldier, like, it just kind of breaks down those barriers. It breaks the ice a little bit, but it also reminds us like we're human. We have interests that other people share with us. And that's something that we can connect with. Everything that Marvel's been putting out and DC lately it's got a really lot of mental health components to it. So like WandaVision just closed up, right? We finished WandaVision. I actually use those sessions to do grief work with one of my clients. And she brought it up and she was like, I don't know if you watched WandaVision. And I was like, go on. keep talking. But we use that show as a template about how you can handle grief and the consequences of how you choose to handle grief. So you give me a pop culture reference and I can make it therapeutic.
I love it. So if a child or an adult comes in, or a family, and they come in and they say, maybe they see one of are these little bobbleheads behind you?
They are.
Okay. Those are amazing. I love it. The little Wookiee. It's like a beacon for other fans, right? To be able to see that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. My office has got little pop dolls of Doctor Who, Stranger Things, and I just have them out as decorations, but absolutely the people who know and who are like drawn to those things absolutely pointed out to me, like, I didn't know you like Star Wars, even though it's like all over my website. I'm like, yeah, I'm a real big fan. And it's, it just kind of sparks that conversation. Plus it helps that it doesn't look like a medical office, because medical offices don't have cool toys like that.
True. Very true. I wish they did, but they don't. Yeah, I love it. So, you've got these like beacons that allow a client coming in. So if I'm thinking about going to a counselor, some of the barriers that we hear about are like, who is this person, right? And even after I've known this therapist for a couple of months and I feel fairly comfortable, therapy can feel like such a one-sided relationship. And it's that way by design, right? It really needs to be that way. If I'm going to therapy with Maria, I don't want to hear about, right, Maria's problems, because I'm talking about my own life, right? And it is that kind of sacred space where we can be ourselves. We can just focus on our stuff. We don't have to be in a caretaking role when we're in there with our therapist. At the same time, while that's super beneficial to us as clients, it can be very, very challenging sometimes, because it's like, I don't know anything about this person. This person knows every odd, weird thought that comes into my head. They know every impulse that I'm fighting and every challenge I've got. They know everything about my family. I don't know anything about this person. And so being able to connect on something like Star Wars or Doctor Who or movies or TV is just such a nice way to be able to feel a little bit more known, like feel like, okay, this is a human being that I'm talking to and not some therapy robot.
Right. Yeah. I think one of the things we continue to try to demystify, right, is that all therapists are like old white men who, just make you feel really uncomfortable and awkward. And we're not. There's a bunch of us that are geeks and nerds, and we have what we're passionate about. And so I think that helps too, like breaking down those barriers, but it also allows for like awesome narrative work where we can like talk about somebody else's problem that's similar to their problem in a way that doesn't feel too attached, right? So one example that I use a lot, especially in working with men, is Tony Stark having a panic attack, right? In one of the Iron Man movies, he has a full-blown panic attack in the middle of a restaurant. And that is such an exceptional piece to show, especially men who are still more uncomfortable opening up in therapy and are a little bit more resistant to talking about what's going on with them or sweep things under the rug, right? Because society still expects them to be macho. But if you show them Iron Man having a panic attack, you can use that to kind of normalize, like, if this were you, how would you help get through that? Or what would you tell Tony to like help get through that? What works for you that might work for him too? And that just kind of helps make some space. It's easier to talk about Tony's panic attack rather than their own potentially. And usually people are drawn to like characters or a storyline that they're really passionate about. And most often it's because there's something about that character that just speaks to them, whether it's what they want to be, like how they would like to see themselves, or a struggle that they seem very similar to what they've gone through themselves. And so it kind of normalizes, like, they're not the only one. And that we can kind of talk about what worked for that person, what didn't work for that person, and how does that apply to them.
Yeah, I love that. So this is the Robert Downey Jr. character in Iron Man, for anybody not aware of who this person is. But when you think about traditional masculinity and expectations that are put on little boys at such a young age in our society, and then these are the heroes that all little, gosh, my daughter's 4, and this is a person that she looks up to. And I hadn't seen the movies, right? But she is really into it. And so the idea that Tony Stark can be a total badass. He can be a total hero. But he also cares about things, and he also struggles with things because he's a person. And I love that idea of you can be both. And I think that movies, science fiction especially, has gotten so much better over the last 10, 20 years at rounding out who a character is. When I think about when I was my daughter's age, when I was 4 to probably like 10, I watched a lot of like Captain Planet, right? And stuff like, these are like, a lot of these characters are kind of like one-dimensional characters, right? Captain Planet comes out, he's got a bunch of muscles, he flies through the air, he punches the guy, and that's the end of it. But I feel like with these movies, and not to start a debate, but as Disney has come into certain franchises, things have gotten a little more complex, and that's amazing for people to be able to see. Okay, this is not the Batman from the 80s when I was first watching Batman, right? Where it's all about like the suit and the like. There's backstory to all of these people, and it gives them a humanity that then I think just validates the fact that we have a humanity and that we have challenges and a backstory too.
Absolutely. We all have our own struggles and our own villains, if you will, that we are struggling with and can learn from. But yeah, I think, I definitely have my own preferences, but like DC, their villains have such robust backstories and origin stories that it makes them feel like real people that you can kind of connect with. And then I think Marvel does a fantastic job with their hero stories, right? Like Captain Marvel's one of my daughter's favorites right now. So we've been watching a lot of that. But like how she was lied to by people she trusted the most, and then had to like deal with, what does that mean when the people that raised you were actually not having your best interest at heart? And so like foster care children really connected to that story. Other teenagers or adults that were like, yeah, I did not have the greatest upbringing, and my parents weren't the healthiest to be around, and I can really connect to that. But we also talk about like your origin story doesn't have to define you, right? So like an origin story for a superhero or a villain is like when they came into power, but that doesn't have to define you. And so one of the other things I really like to use in pop culture, Star Wars, are character arcs. right? So I know we've forgiven you guys for not knowing Star Wars. I've given you my blessing. You get a pass this year. But in the latest Star Wars trilogy, Kylo Ren is like the big bad, right? And I say right, like you guys know. So Kylo, you're like, yes, he is. Kylo Ren
I do know that much.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
For his name.
But if you watch that, the newest trilogy, at the end, he has a redeeming arc and becomes a good guy and like tries to make amends. And same with the original trilogy. Darth Vader is like the big bad, but at the end, he tries to do right. It's a little late, but you can tell like there was good in his heart at some point. He did have love. He did have, things that he was passionate about, people he cared about. He just, displayed that in an unhealthy way for a very long time. But yeah, I even just recently did a training on using villains specifically in therapy because you can like a villain. That doesn't mean you're a psychopath, sociopath. There's nothing necessarily wrong with liking a villain, but more so because villains do have a backstory and they're humanized and there's a reason that they're doing what they're doing. It's not always a good reason, but sometimes it is. It's just the wrong way to go about it.
Yeah. And I think it helps for us to be able to say, okay, we have been the villain in other people's stories before, right? And so there are interactions that we've had where we have not responded the way we would have liked to, right? Or have responded in a way that totally felt valid at the time. But then when we look back on it 10 years later, we go, okay, if I'd known then what I know now. And so we do, as people, we change constantly all the time. And it's okay to do that. I do think about Darth Vader, when I was first introduced to Darth Vader, I used to have like nightmares about Darth Vader because he was it was like, you are the bad guy. You're the baddie. Like that's it. You're the bad guy. End of story. Right. But then, as they started to come out, like Anakin Starwalker, right. In these movies, this is a name I know, but just from that perspective, right, as not a Star Wars fan myself, but at least being able to know, okay, like from pop culture, just hearing things and seeing things that everybody was a child. Everybody had experiences in childhood and in growing up that have impacted the way that we react to certain things, and the way that we interact with other people. And so I love the idea of being able to relate with some of those villains and go, I've done that. Like I've been that. I've been the villain in somebody else's story. Right. Yes. And it also can help us to be able to look at the villains in our own stories and go, okay, can I give some empathy? Can I try to intentionally understand what's going on with the villain in my current situation?
Absolutely. Like looking at what's the goal? What are they trying to achieve in my life? And is there a better way, a healthier way that maybe we can work on that together? Right. But yeah, Anakin, being shown in the prequels, and everyone has their views about the prequels. But in a therapeutic lens, getting to see Anakin as a young boy and then as a young adult, and then Darth Vader, like, spoiler alert, 30, 40 years later, Anakin is Darth Vader. But, you get to see him and humanize that he was a kid. He was a kid that like got taken from his mom willingly, like he willingly went to have a better life. Then lost his mom, then lost the love of his life, and just couldn't handle all that pain and suffering. And so he looked for relief, which was offered by the dark side. Did he want to be a baddie and kill a bunch of people? Probably not. Like that probably wasn't his initial intention, but it was like, I'm hurting and you're offering me potential relief. So I'm going to take that, even though it's not what's best for me.
Absolutely. I feel like there have been so many movies lately that are the villain's story, right? So I think about even like Maleficent from Sleeping Beauty. Oh my gosh, how awesome. And then coming out soon in our local Iowa theater, but Cruella de Vil, Cruella de Vil's movie. And in 101 Dalmatians, she's such a flat character. She is a one-dimensional, I'm a bad dog killer. Like that's my story. That's who I am. And I love this idea of being able to see these people as, no, these are people who have had experiences and made choices that hurt other people. Right. But we can see why they may have made those choices. Yeah. I think it definitely helps us to, one, if we have shame about some of the choices we've made in the past that have hurt other people, being able to forgive ourselves, being able to look to try to make amends and reconnect with people that we may have hurt, because we're able to say, I see what happened. I can see it, right? And through therapy and through gaining some perspective on those situations, we can go, I can see it. I can see what happened. I can see why I did it. And as you were talking about with the narrative side of utilizing these pop culture movies and shows to be able to say, yeah, like sometimes in movies, it's a snapshot. It's just a snapshot of that moment, of that day. I have days where I feel great. I have days where I feel horrible, right? I have days where I make great decisions and days I don't. And it's a snapshot of that, but that's not our entire story. That's not our entire narrative. I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's, there's always a chance for us to pause, especially coming to therapy. We can pause and say, okay, how did I get here? Let's look at that. And where do I want to go? Just because I'm on this path doesn't mean I have to stay on this path. I can make choices to change my own story, to change my own narrative, but that can really only happen when you see where you're coming from and why maybe you were making the choices you were making. So I think, like, the redemption arcs are always nice. The full circle, looking at villains' origin stories, like it's not often that people are just born evil. Things generally happen to them, and that trauma is unresolved, and so they make bad choices. So I think that's really helpful with, like, Maleficent. I think Loki's TV show is coming out soon on Disney. So, like, people are interested in villains because they're also a little bit more human than heroes. Yeah. Right. Because heroes are like, they're indestructible and they're always perfect. Positive. Yeah. And they're always perfect. And villains are seen as the bad guys, but I mean, I'm a dark side fan. So it's like, I think that's my empathy, right? Like, something happened to you, something hurt you so bad that you're behaving this way. Come talk to me. Like, if I could be the villain therapist, like, sign me. I'm there 100%.
What would it be like if they had a therapist on the Death Star?
Right.
I mean, every Star Trek ship has a therapist on board, right? Counselor Troy, they've got a counselor therapist on board in Star Trek. Where is this in Star Wars? Where's the representation?
Just write me in. I'm here. I'll do it happily. But I mean, there's, and there are some nice pieces that people can pick up if they're interested. So, like, Heroes in Crisis is a comic book, but it's done in, like, what do you call it? When you go in and you just talk to the camera. And so it's all the heroes dealing with their depression, dealing with their own traumas, dealing with, people that they've killed, inadvertently as heroes. But that was like and it's like hardback, but it's so good. And it kind of works through, like, different, Harley Quinn is in there, but so is Batman and, like, all the different heroes, Aquaman. And they get to share, like, being a hero is really hard. It's really hard sometimes because bad things do happen, even though we're trying to do good. And that's a whole nother debate. We could debate if there are actually heroes and villains, or, people that are liked and not liked, and which way that goes, right? Because both of them have destruction, right? Like Batman versus Superman. There's two heroes and they destroyed cities fighting each other. Right? Just like,
Yeah, we do a benefits versus like a cost analysis on some of these scenes that they're very entertaining to watch. But I think sometimes as I'm watching fiction, my head goes into like, that's expensive. Like they just, right? Like, okay, all the people trying to get to work on that freeway now can't get to work, right? So my head goes there, which is a little bit distracting when I'm trying to enjoy, a story. But I think I think The Incredibles did such a good job with that, because in The Incredibles, the main storyline is like, you are disruptive. Like you're a hero and you're trying to do good, but like you're creating havoc in this city, and they outlaw superheroes. When I saw that, I thought like, yes, that's real.
Yeah,
that's what would actually happen.
Absolutely. Yeah. Same with like Civil War, right? Like that broke the Avengers because one team was like, we have to be more responsible for what we're doing. And the other team was like, but that requires government oversight, and we're not about that. Right. So that's a team of heroes that couldn't agree on which was the right path to take. So even heroes don't have all the right answers. And I think that that's an important piece too, right? It's Star Wars days. So going back to like even Luke Skywalker, right? And his storyline, that there were moments where he made decisions that he later regretted. And it's kicked off a path for other characters that led them in a way that wouldn't have gone that way had he not behaved that way, right? So, and Luke is a hero. Like nobody's going to dispute that Luke is a hero, but he definitely made some choices that then he sent himself into exile because he was so ashamed of what he did. So heroes don't even get it right? Like there's a book we read my kids is like even superheroes have a bad day, and even superheroes make mistakes. Right? Like superheroes are not infallible. They're not quite human either, but they have human qualities that don't kind of outshine everything else. So, stories like that, stories with, Finn and Rey, being able to kind of bond together, and then Kylo and Rey actually like coming together and like bringing Kylo back to the light side, and, back to being Ben Solo. And she saw the good in him. She saw the person in him, the heart in him, and tried to hold on to that piece when everyone else is like, Kylo's just like killing people and murdering everybody. Like, what are you doing? Why are you trying to befriend this guy? Like, that's not the thing. So I think that those storylines are really, really important, but it makes therapy fun, right? Like, so when I work with adults and kids, we talk about like assembling their Avengers team, right? So who's your support network? Who are the people that you call on when you need help? Because nobody works alone, not for very long, and not successfully. So let's build your Avengers team, right? Or if you're a DC fan, like let's build your Suicide Squad, or like let's put your Rebel team together. Who do you rely on? And that's so much more fun than let's talk about your support system, right? Like let's talk about your Avengers team. Who do we have on deck, right? Like it's just so much more fun and relatable, and people are likely to reach out to an Avenger teammate rather than saying like, oh, I gotta call my support system. Okay, who's on my list? And it's so much more fun. And we can talk about lightsabers and how to use those, and how you wield them determines their power. We could talk about Star Wars all day long, ladies. Like this is not going to be a long enough podcast. But there's also just like the light and dark, right? Like just the Force itself is this overarching thing in Star Wars that can be used for good, for evil, and then for the in-between, right? So like it's available to those that are Force sensitive, but what they choose to do with it is on them, right? So I relate that back to like genetically, you may be predisposed to a number of addictions or mental health issues, but just because it's there doesn't mean it's going to dictate how you use it. So let's figure out how to use it for good. Let's turn on those superpowers. Like I do superpowers and kryptonite instead of strengths and weaknesses, because it's just more fun.
Yes, absolutely. I love that. I mean, when when we think about, an Avengers team or so, we are talking about strengths and weaknesses. I mean, if somebody's superpower is they can see through things and another person's is that they have super speed. If my superpower is that I have X-ray vision, it doesn't mean that something is wrong with me because I don't have super speed, right? It just means that like we're human beings and we're designed to connect with other human beings, and none of us have every power. And so I do love that idea of, in Captain Planet, they let
That's your pop culture reference.
I don't know if anybody ever, but the thing that's coming to mind is like the water power, right? Would like swirl the water, the wind would swirl the water up, and then they would freeze it. Right. And so and then they'd climb up that and go in the window or whatever it is. And so each person is not responsible for having every strength or being good at everything, as long as they have their team around them. So I love that way of talking about strengths and being able to accept our weaknesses as well and accept ourselves even with them, and then building that support system around us. That is really,
absolutely.
Really fun.
Absolutely. And, and one of my favorite Star Wars movies is Rogue One. And it's not a trilogy movie. It's like a one-shot offset story. But if you look at it, it's a story about these characters that are going to go do this random mission that's going to like make or break the battle between good and evil, right? And it's so well done, but it's a small little piece in like this huge story. And so we talk about like, that's one person who then got a small group together to go do this one mission. And then they set up the rest of their team to be successful. So even though sometimes we're doing things and we're like, what is the purpose of this? Like, what is this actually going to do? I feel like this is a drop in a very big ocean. That storyline helps them remember that, yes, it may be a drop, but your drop is going to cause a ripple that's going to make a wave for someone else. So I love that story so much. Jen Erso is probably one of my favorite characters. But that story, I often will like assign it for homework. To like go watch that story if you're a Star Wars fan and look at it through this lens, right? Like they felt like they had this one offshoot mission that nobody thought was going to be worth it. And in the end, they are what gives Leia the plans to then destroy the Death Star. It's magical when you look at it, like a tiny little drop in the ocean, but what a huge wave that caused at the end.
Yeah, I love that. Just for, talking about significance, that everybody has significance. And I think that especially in 2020, when our lives got shrunk, right? I feel like our significance as it comes to, other people, I think that a lot of the presenting things that now in 2021, people are coming into counseling to talk about really do have to do with significance. What is my life about? How do I matter to other people? And so what a great, that's a fun homework assignment anyway, but, right? But what a great example, in a way to use that idea of, our perception of how significant something is not necessarily accurate. We can think that the events of our lives are not at all significant, but somebody else these characters, they thought that their situation was not at all significant, but we've seen the other movies. We know that it is. And so being able to broaden out, zoom out, call that zoom out and be able to zoom out on that bigger picture is so important. So when you work with families, do you often assign homework assignments like that, where the family will watch a certain clip or watch a certain movie?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm kind of being outed as like a geek therapist, right? So when people seek me out, they kind of know we're not going to be doing traditional talk therapy. But I do sometimes I'll find a clip for them or assign a movie for them in looking at it in a different way, right? Because usually, general moviegoers are going to just be entertained. I clearly love it and I'm entertained, but then I also have my therapeutic lens that I look at it and go, oh my gosh. So then I'll assign them, like, I want you to watch this one character and just follow their character development. Or I want you to watch this movie and look at it as what you're going through right now. Are there any similarities that you see? What jumps out at you? I know you may have seen it like a million times, but this time watch it like in this lens.
Yeah.
And with families too, like I'll have them, we'll do character write-ups so they can develop their own super person, their superhero. And that's another way of talking about strengths and weaknesses, right? But then we also like, how do you fit in the family system? How does your superhero fit in with the rest of them? Because we fill in the gaps, right? When we make our teams, we fill in the gaps for what we're lacking. And so that can be really powerful for families to be like, that's not my strength. Like time management is not my strength. But my partner is very like, time sensitive and oriented. Or like with the kids, like I've got a helper and then I have a curiosity kid, right? So like the helper is the one we know can help with like picking up after school time. And the curiosity one is going to be like, okay, like today I really want to go and find 5 different types of flowers. Let's go. Right. Whereas like, if you didn't have that, if you only had helpers or you only had kids that were curious, then you would miss out on some of those other pieces. So helping the family see how they fit together as a whole and embrace the differences is really helpful for them.
Yeah, I love that. I love the idea of being able to project out right onto a movie what's going on with ourselves. I remember when I was a new therapist, the Hunger Games were coming out in the theater, and my husband said, like, we should go watch this. And I was like, I don't want. So I chalked it up to research, and I was like, okay, listen, like every kid I am working with is going to be talking about this movie. I need to know a little bit. And so I went and I watched them all, and I chalked it up to research. And the same thing with like Harry Potter and everything else. Like I enjoyed myself once I got there. My initial reaction was like, I don't really want to do that. However, it was so helpful in being able to identify those things. I feel like it's come up a couple times in here, but Pixar does such a good job of being realistic. Like Monsters University, when Sully and Mike got expelled from school, I was like, yes. And just so situations like that in movies, I'm with you when I watch a movie, or when I'll go and do that intentionally, because then I go, okay, yeah, now I can use this therapeutically.
Yes. Absolutely. I assign Inside Out to families to watch all the time. Inside Out was so well done. But for parents, it's helpful for them to remember, like, their kids' brains are not fully wired. Yeah. And so they are jumping from emotion to emotion. And what's going on in their head feels so much bigger than to like the adults that are watching them happen. So absolutely, that's fantastic. Harry Potter. We do a lot of Harry Potter intervention. Like we make wands in here. We make our own spells. And there's just so much out there. So like Twilight, when I was a younger therapist, when those movies were coming out, I worked in a residential girls unit. So they were all about Twilight. And then I ruined it for them by talking about how that relationship was really unhealthy. And here are all the ways. Here are all the red flags. So they didn't like that, but it meant something to them, right? Like they could see that, oh yeah, him showing up at all hours of the night, not healthy. Yeah. Her falling to pieces and literally like laying in a forest because he left her, not healthy, right? So yeah, absolutely. If kids are into something like Steven Universe has a lot of great clips that I share with people about breathing and calming like racing thoughts. It's also very gender fluid and affirming, which is really nice to see in a cartoon. But yeah, I'll assign clips, or I'll send them clips to watch together. And then we'll talk about them when they come back. But it'll be difficult for me to not find a therapeutic use for almost anything people are watching.
I love it. So you have your office, you have it set up with your tools. You've got your miniatures for your sand tray stuff. You've got your bobbleheads. And then of course you are adorned with your clues, right? And what I love about it though, is that it's still client directed. So these things are here. And whatever the client is then attracted to or brings up or talks about is where you go. And you as the clinician are open to any of these discussions, topics, movies. If you don't know about it, they can teach you about.
They do often. Yeah. That's how I found out about Steven Universe. One of my teens was like, I don't know. I mean, I know you're into stuff, but I don't know if you've ever seen. And I was like, I haven't. So she actually brought a clip and showed it to me on her phone. And she was like, I listened to this. And I was like, this is magical.
Yeah.
I'm off to watch Steven Universe and learn all the things.
Awesome.
But it's also, I mean, we don't have to be the experts.
Yeah.
And that's the nice thing too about therapists wanting to use pop culture. We don't have to be the experts. Our clients can teach us why it's important to them. And that's enough. That's enough to be able to share that and connect with that and build upon that.
Absolutely. It's kind of like the way that, a lot of clinicians use music and use different either songs or lyrics that a client might present. And the thing about music or a movie, two clients can be fans of the same song, the same movie, and to have completely different takes on it based on their own life experience and who do they connect with in that movie and why. And, I've had movies that I watched when I was a kid, and then I watched when I was a younger adult, and then I've watched now with my daughter, and I have totally different experiences as I'm watching those movies. And so, these different worlds that are created, thinking about Harry Potter, it takes some of the limitations that maybe we've put on ourselves in the world that we live in, the reality that we see. My reality is not the same as Chris's. It's not the same as yours, right? And so even though we might experience the same things or the same day or go the same places. And so what I love about that is that a lot of the limitations in our reality, in our world that we experience, we put on ourselves. And so thinking about imagining myself in a Harry Potter universe, those limits don't have to exist because other limits don't, like things like gravity or time travel and, things like that don't exist as limits in the Harry Potter universe. And so I can then use that to take some of the other limitations that I might take off of myself of who I am, right? And what I'm able to do and what I'm able to learn and all of those things that we put on ourselves can be removed by transferring ourselves mentally kind of into that universe, thinking through what that would be like and then bringing that back.
Absolutely. I mean, and then the possibilities are endless. And generally what happens is you find a solution that is practical in a lot of ways, right? Like you won't have an actual magic wand, but you might be able to come up with something that you thought wasn't an option before because you allowed yourself to think magically for a little bit. And what is that if not like, dreams and hopes and goals, right? Like that's magic thinking. And if you can get a clear picture, then you can make a path. And that can be a fun adventure to go on.
Absolutely. If I thought, gosh, I don't like my small town, as I was a teenager, right? It was always, I don't want to live in this town. And right. But if I could think about that and go, well, if I had a magic wand, this is the kind of place I would live. Like, okay, give me 15, 20 years. I can live there. If I wanted to live in New York right now, I could do that. And so being able to, take off some of those limitations that we might have and go, well, what would I want it to look like? And then generate the how, right? And the when and those steps in between. Yeah. So it's a way to do the miracle question too. Like what would your life look like if you could just magic wand it? And these are interventions that therapists are doing in these sessions, but being able to use these different kinds of fiction, of movies, of these different worlds and galaxies, like you said, is such a fun way to do it. It's just such a great, like instant connection.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we talked about how movies and shows are becoming more humanized, right? Like these characters are rounded out a bit more. So we often will think about like, okay, if you were Ray, right? Like Ray starts off as like a nobody, a scrap finder, like no family, no friends. She like her whole life is dependent upon finding scrap pieces and hauling them in so that she can feed herself, to becoming Ray, like savior of the galaxy. So if we were to look at your story, maybe you still feel like you're in the scavenger part of your story. what would it look like if you were the hero version of your story? And what steps do you think would have to take to get there? Because it's not impossible. We can all change our stories and our narratives. And what better to do it with a supportive therapist who's like right beside you going, heck yes, let's get the lightsabers out. Let's talk about this. I'm going to assign you homework that's Star Wars related. I mean, what's better than that?
Yeah. That's awesome. So if you are a fan of any kind of movies, books, comic books, anything, or if you've got a passion really in anything. So if you are super into musicals, or you're super into horses and horseback riding, or you're super into, it doesn't matter what it is, those passions are part of you. And guaranteed, no matter what your hobby is, if it's like finding geodes every day after school, there is a therapist out there who is just as excited about those things as you are. So, as technology improves, the world gets smaller and smaller. And we're able to talk to Maria today from New Mexico, and we're in Iowa right now. And so it is possible to find therapists like that. People like Maria are out there. Maria LaQuerre, they care. They want to. They want to help, and they're going to make it fun. And sometimes, when children need counseling or need some services, it can be difficult for parents to go, oh, are they going to talk to this person? Are they going to whatever? And so being able to know that, okay, this is possible. This is possible to find a therapist who is interested in these same things, is going to hear your child's interpretation of what their world is. And for children of all ages, these characters are a part of their world. These characters matter just as much as their uncle matters, right? In their lives, sometimes even more.
Especially those teenagers, right?
Yes.
Yeah, they'll listen to their friends and movie stars and characters more than they'll listen to mom and dad.
That's right. Absolutely. So let's utilize that for their benefit, right? So I love that. Maria, if you could give a suggestion to either a parent thinking about family counseling, or counseling for their kiddo, or counseling for themselves, what suggestion might you give to somebody on the fence about starting counseling?
Ooh, that's a great question. I think I would probably tell them to find someone that just sparks that interest for them, because we're all very unique, and I'm not the right therapist for everybody, and everyone's not the right client for me. But when we do have that spark, it's not work. It's fun, and progress happens, and healing can happen, and it can be magical. But if you go and that person's not the right person for you, and they don't spark you up, keep going. Look for another one, because we are out there. Yes. Whatever your passion is, there's someone who's got it also and is willing to use that in helping you heal.
Yes, I love that. So don't give up. If you're a huge fan of something and it's important to you, and your therapist doesn't get it, that's okay. There are other therapists out there who are going to get it, who are invested in getting it. So I love that. Well, Maria, thank you so much for being on this episode. It has been so fun. I've learned a lot. I think that it's just so awesome to hear, these kinds of stories in counseling terms.
Thank you.
And
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And hopefully helpful to parents too, who maybe you drop off your child at counseling and they come out and you're like, what did you do? And they're like, we talked about Star Wars. And you're like, what? Why did I bring you here to talk about Star Wars? This is why.
It's real work.
Yes,
it's real work.
It is. It's such important work. And so I love just being able to kind of give people a window into that real clinical work that is happening when your child says, well, we played Star Wars Uno, right?
I'm Maria LaQuerre, and I need a counselor.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Thank you so much. And very, very happy May the 4th to you. We are so appreciative of you being here. This has been so, so fun. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And may the 4th be with you.
Yes. And also with you and everybody listening as well. Awesome. So if you are in New Mexico, definitely, how can people find you, Maria? What's your website? How do people find you?
Yeah, absolutely. My website is anewhopetc.org. Yes. That is a Star Wars reference.
Love it.
It's a New Hope Therapy Center. We're in Las Cruces, New Mexico. We also have a Facebook page, and I write blogs about using pop culture in therapy, everything from Disney to Marvel to Star Wars, and that's all on our website.
So cool. Awesome. Very, very cool. All right. So, and if you're in Iowa and you're interested in starting counseling, give us a call at Heart and Solutions, 800-531-4236.
And like Julie mentioned at the beginning, we post a new episode every Sunday at 5 p.m. Central. So save up your laundry, do your laundry, get ready for the week and listen to our new episode. And then we can prepare you to call a counselor that week for yourself as well.
Yeah. If you've got questions for Maria about, gosh, even if you're a clinician listening to this and you go, okay, my client's super into this. What is this? How do you use this intervention wise? Send us reach out on Facebook for Maria, but also you can reach out to us too, and we'll get you connected with her as well.
So I'm Krista Brown.
And I'm Julie Johnson, and we need a counselor.
And so do you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.